relationships, and curious conversations. I'm Mandy Pallock, and I'm here with Evan Barber. Evan is the senior editor and podcast host at Axis, where he's been for over 10 years. And Evan, as a parent and as someone deeply involved in children and youth ministry, I appreciate Axis's mission statement that Axis equips parents for gospel-centered conversations with their teen about faith and culture. So Evan, we are so glad and grateful that you are here.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. So as a parent of a teen, I am your target market. And I know that there are many who are listening or watching this conversation that are as well, that those who are very much loving the next generation, who passionately believe that God is doing something amazing in and through them, and that those gospel-centered conversations make a difference. You're doing important, needed work. We have so much to learn from you, so I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, me too. Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay. So one thing that came to mind just off the top of my head for sure as I was contemplating is so many times as parents and mentors, we might be scared of pop culture. We're not too familiar with it. But I see you consistently, time after time, bringing the wisdom of Scripture, the sensitivity of the Holy Spirit to show how faith is relevant in every aspect of our lives. And I've heard you describe this process as leveraging pop culture. What do you mean by that? And how can parents maximize moments that let us do this?
Yeah, great question. And I think that's really pretty core to what we're trying to help parents and other caring adults do as our organization Access. So our goal broadly is to translate pop culture to help parents and other caring adults understand and disciple their teenagers. So the idea of leveraging pop culture is basically trying to use pop culture in service of a deeper point.
Hmm.
So let me back up for a second and give a little bit of some context on this idea. When I first came to Axis, we were doing live presentations about worldview for students with up to the week popular songs.
Mhm.
And the way we went about it was we would kind of really dissect the ideas and the messaging in these current popular songs and try to show how most of the time they fell short of a biblical worldview, basically, or show how ideas contained in those lyrics went against scriptural wisdom. We found that over time, by only taking that sort of critical dissection, I don't know, posture,
Mhm.
but we also actually kind of alienated a lot of the students who were in our audiences.
Mhm.
They felt like by us criticizing the music and media they loved, in a way we were criticizing them.
Mhm.
And so we kind of started to just remember and realize that for a lot of people, music and media are very personal. You
Mhm.
know, these are things that are close to the rising generation's heart, for better or worse, right?
Mhm.
Um, so we began to think, instead of just like fighting culture head on, is there a way to kind of go with the grain in some sense of these cultural icons and events instead of just combating them directly, so to speak?
Mhm.
And I realized there's a really interesting biblical precedent for doing this. I don't know if anyone in your series has already talked about that famous Acts chapter 17 situation
Tell
where,
us about it.
yeah, so the Apostle Paul, he's in Athens, it's full of idols, and he's really disturbed by that because he doesn't want people to worship idols.
Mhm.
And what he does in that context is he decides to use the culture around him in a subversive attempt to point people to the gospel.
Mhm.
So in Acts 17, 28, and 29, he quotes two thinkers from their culture who they're the ones who wrote, "For in him we live and move and have our being,
Mhm.
and then we are indeed his offspring." And that line, "we are indeed his offspring," actually comes from a poem about Zeus
Mhm.
that was called Phenomena. which says, let us begin with Zeus, who we mortals never leave unspoken, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for we are indeed his offspring, right? And I just think that's so fascinating because from Paul's vantage point, the biggest obstacle to the gospel there was that sort of idolatry, right?
Mhm.
But instead of trying to ignore the issue, he fearlessly hijacks a poem about a pagan god to
Mhm.
redirect his audience to the gospel.
Mhm.
And I think that's just such an incredible example of leveraging the culture around him in service of, no, you think this is about Zeus? I'm actually going to take it and I'm going to apply it to Jesus. I'm actually going to apply it to the creator that scripture talks about, instead of, hey, this says we are indeed his offspring, and it's talking about Zeus, therefore it's a lie, and you have believed a lie. He
Mhm.
just, instead, he takes it and he's like, okay, what's contained here that I can redeem or that I
Mhm.
can apply to a different context? Um, and I think that's the way into some of these conversations for parents and caring adults. When um, your son or daughter really cares about a piece of media or an influencer, it, even though it might be hard to find something that feels redeemable at times,
Mhm.
I think that there's often something that's like, we can redirect that.
Mhm. Mhm.
We use a framework at Access that we call Good, Bad Bible,
Mhm.
which is basically what's good about this, what's bad about this, and what does the Bible say about it.
Mhm.
And we found that a lot of the time, by starting with some form of appreciation, even if it's just, hey, this song is really well produced, or this musician has a beautiful voice. Even if what they're singing is just vile, there's still an element of the goodness of God's creation that can be kind of selected there. And
Mhm.
it seems like a lot of the time when we're talking with the next generation about their favorite songs or shows or influencers or whatever, being able to start with some form of like, no, here's something that we can actually appreciate
Mhm.
opens the door for deeper conversation about,
Yes.
well, is there anything else? Is there anything in this that you um, take issue with, or however someone wants to get into that side of things? I
Mhm.
feel like just coming in with, well, this is really problematic,
Mhm.
can shut the door to a conversation pretty quickly.
Yes, yes, yes. And not just shut the door. You're like shutting the door. You're taking the doorknob off. You're throwing it away.
Yeah,
That's the end of that conversation.
right, right, right.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you're talking about. It's this orientation that all of life is sacred, and that
Yeah,
there's always a time where we can, have those conversations about good, bad, Bible. What does that look like? Whether it's about media or an influencer or a public figure or someone
right,
in their life that we want to talk, something in their life that we want to talk about. It's such a good grounding way to have that conversation and a really practical way that we can do driving to school or, washing the dishes and what that looks like.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Um, so can you tell us about Axis's one conversation model? What does that look like?
Yeah, so what we call the one conversation model is the idea that every interaction parents get to have with their sons and their daughters is just part of one big lifelong conversation that
Mm.
parents get to have.
Hmm.
So it's kind of the idea that we've got time.
Hmm.
We don't have to force every big lesson that we might want to teach right now. We can breathe a bit and let, to a certain extent, the things that they are already paying attention to be sort of a cue to enter into some sort of deeper topic. So it's about, instead of like, well, I gotta have the one sex talk this weekend.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's about breaking it up and taking kind of a longer view on some of those things. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, there's more to parenting than just talking to your son or daughter about sex. But to use that example, there's a quote that I have really appreciated from a woman named Dr. Tina Shermer Sellers, who said she was talking about the sex talk,
Hmm.
and she said, children and adolescents do not need one 100-minute awkward and painful sexual health conversation. They need 100 1-minute conversations. They
Hmm.
need sexual and relational education delivered in many, many sound bites weekly across their entire childhood and teen years.
Hmm.
So, this one conversation idea is kind of about applying that mindset to everything. It's
Hmm.
keeping the door open. It's paying attention to what your son or your daughter is interested in or cares about or preoccupied with, and trying to, again, leverage that for bringing up some of these deeper topics,
Hmm.
music, but also mental health, faith, doubt, video games,
Hmm.
social media, prayer, these kinds of things.
Hmm.
Um, and again, it requires caring about what our kids care about
Hmm.
and paying attention to what they are paying attention to.
Hmm.
Um, so if my son's favorite social media influencer starts talking a whole lot about money, well, if I don't know that, I won't be aware of the opportunity that is there to bring some of the Bible's wisdom to bear on the topic of money, because the Bible has a lot to say about money.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so that's kind of the angle, it's kind of let topics arise somewhat organically, ask curious questions, develop a good question habit
Hmm.
to refer to your work, and allow that to guide where the conversation goes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that curious those curious questions. I find so much freedom in that because I don't know what I don't know,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to pop culture. I live under a pretty happy rock and and I depend on, people to kind of help me understand what's going on in the world and I know what I don't know what I don't know. And so when I
Mm.
can ask questions
Yeah.
and even just be curious about it, it kicks off so much of a better conversation. For
Yeah.
example, my kids love Minecraft, and
Yeah.
I don't get Minecraft. But the best conversation I've had is when I'm just like, "Hey, I don't get Minecraft. What is it that like t teach me, tell me what is it that's so fascinating?" And it kicked off one of the best conversations I've had with my two sons, and it's all around this game that I don't get.
Yeah.
And yet we had that thing that we could converse about, and it was a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
I can remember when I was younger playing certain video games and really wanting my dad to just like sit down with me and experience it.
Mm,
And it sounds like maybe that's what they got to experience with you there
yes.
is
Hmm.
you demonstrated an interest in Minecraft with
Hmm.
them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um I think that because parents are busy, life is crazy, technology allows us to take work home with us every night.
Hmm.
That there it can feel like there's not time to sit down and pay attention to something like Minecraft, right? It can feel trivial or unimportant, but it really demonstrates a care. I think the media that we love, it becomes personal for us, and I
100%.
think that's true for it sounds like it's true for your sons, and I think that's
Yes.
true for probably most of us.
Hmm. 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 It reminds me of that poem by Yeats where he says, I've spread my dreams under your feet, tread lightly, for you tread upon
Mm,
dreams.
yeah.
And when we're asking our kids these curious questions about the songs that they're humming throughout their day and the things that they're looking to, we're treading upon their dreams. We want to tread lightly
Hmm.
and really respect that.
Right. And I think just on the note of humming songs, music is a very mysterious thing because I think a lot of the time when maybe Christians want to do analysis, the easiest thing to analyze is the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the time, there are varying amounts of, I'll call it lyrical prominence,
Mm-hmm.
within songs. For some songs, clearly the point is they want you to hear what she's saying.
Yes.
In other songs, it's kind of like the vocals are sort of swallowed up by a really chaotic beat or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so loving a song is not necessarily an indication of agreement with the worldview represented in the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
So there's sort of a couple of layers there that are kind of complicated to navigate, can be complicated to navigate because it's
Yes.
if, someone's teenage daughter really likes music by, let's say, Sabrina Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that doesn't necessarily mean that they think she has the right idea.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be the sound. It could be something about the beat. It could be something about the production. It could just be, well, this is what all of the popular girls at school listen to, and I kind of want to feel like I belong. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna kind of go along with this.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that. And
so,
if we don't bring that curiosity, then we would miss out on the opportunity of knowing what is
right,
that's resonating with my child that I love
right,
about this thing that they love. Hmm.
right,
Hmm.
right. Yeah, even if like the there's some stuff in the lyrics that's like quite over sexualized, and it's like, well, that's I mean, we should scripture talks a lot about sexuality and
Hmm.
the purposes of that kind of thing, but it isn't necessarily true that they like the song because of that content.
Hmm.
There
Hmm.
and so yeah, as you're saying, digging into what do you like what do you like about this? Not with the tone of what do you like about this, but what what do you appreciate about this artist or this song?
Yes.
Trying to
Yes.
hold it somewhat open, I
Hmm.
think.
Hmm. I love that. And as a parent is showing themselves trustworthy and curious in that context again and again through that one conversation idea, um, they're showing that they're ready for the big hard conversations when
Right.
those come up, and they've already shown, oh, I'm not going to shut you down. I'm not going to attack this thing that you love. We're going to have a conversation about good, bad Bible, and it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
this consistent thread throughout the
Mm-hmm.
conversations that we have. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, totally, and I think a friend of mine is involved with youth ministry with some teenage girls, and they're all a big fan of Olivia Rodrigo.
Hmm.
And she came out with some new music last year. And there's one song in particular that's pretty hookup culture-y.
Hmm.
And they, most of the girls in that circle, at least to her in that moment, were like, yeah, I love Olivia Rodrigo. I hate this song,
Hmm.
and I feel like those kinds of um, dynamics just open up opportunities to talk in a like the line from that to talking about human sexuality and God's design for intimacy is pretty direct, if people are willing to
Absolutely.
go there.
Yes. What a beautiful opportunity. Yeah, to have those
Right.
conversations. Hmm. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of those, literal and direct, but sometimes hard conversations, I love that Access provides these phenomenal guides that support parents and mentors as they're having these conversations with their teens. And I've seen that those topics range from, eating disorders to anxiety to
Hmm.
purpose to LGBTQ plus to Taylor Swift. And the guides that you have, they equip parents to have these confident conversations about massive topics. So
Hmm.
I'm wondering, with that in mind, can you give us specific overarching guidelines about the how of a conversation?
Yeah.
How should parents have these difficult conversations with teens?
I think this is so important because I, I actually really believe that conversation is a skill
Mhm.
that takes practice and that not everyone has. Um, I think conversation, when it's really going the way it ought to go, involves asking questions
Hmm.
to the other party. I would say, especially in our discussion here,
Hmm.
with as little tone of judgment or accusation as possible,
Hmm.
trying to understand the other person's point of view. Maybe in this case, it's your son or your daughter or whatever, and then listening actively and trying to restate what they say in your own words.
Hmm.
And there's a way to do the restate thing that feels really mechanical and awkward, but there's a way to do it that I think really makes a difference because people, including the rising generation, want to feel heard and understood. I mean, there's this quote from David Augsburger,
Hmm.
and his quote is, "Being heard is so close to being loved that
Hmm.
for the average person, they are nearly indistinguishable."
Hmm.
And I think there's something about feeling like someone cares enough about us to try to understand our perspective
Yes.
that just really unlocks something in our heart. Um, and I think too, a lot of the time the goal that a parent might have in a conversation about one of the more intense topics is to try to persuade their son or daughter to accept their point of view,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
Um, but there's this sense in which, for whatever reason, trying to understand someone else's point of view makes them more receptive to our point of view.
Hmm.
Um, I'll give you another quote from it's a book called Difficult Conversations,
Hmm.
written by three authors, Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. And they write this. It's a paragraph, but I feel like it's really interesting.
Let's hear it.
Changes in attitudes and behavior rarely come about because of arguments, facts, and attempts to persuade. How often do you change your values and beliefs, or whom you love, or what you want in life based on something someone tells you? And how likely are you to do so when the person who is trying to change you doesn't seem to be aware of the reasons you see things differently in the first place? So, again, for whatever reason, if I feel like someone is trying to understand my point of view, I'm much more willing to consider their point of view.
Hmm.
Something about that just, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll listen to you too,
Absolutely. That's
and so I feel like that's some of the posture that becomes really important in these kinds of conversations.
so huge. Yeah. John Knox said, it's impossible to antagonize and influence at the same time,
Mm,
which is what you're saying there. How often that
yeah.
doesn't happen to us? Why would we expect it to happen
Right.
with the people that we're in these loving conversations with? Okay, so what I hear you saying then is as we're having these difficult conversations, come into it with the heart of listening, with asking curious questions and active listening, and then restating in a approachable way what I
Hmm.
heard someone say, and
Yeah.
then seeing are we still on the same ground, continuing the conversation, kind of repeating that process as we go through this hard conversation. Hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Kind of like you're building a skyscraper floor by floor.
Hmm.
It's like,
Hmm.
okay, did we get this? Did we get this right? Okay. Granted, I don't know anything about construction, so don't take this as
I'm really good at
advice for
picking out
that.
the paint color.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, it's like, oh, okay, did we understand um did we understand each other here?
Mhm.
Okay, well maybe let's try to go here. Okay, did we
Mhm.
understand each other here? Okay, well let's and you're building rapport, you're pursuing truth together,
Mhm.
ideally, I think is
Yeah.
is one of the things that can go on there.
Mhm.
And this isn't to say never make statements, only ever ask questions.
Mhm.
But it's I think a counterbalance to the impulse that probably comes more naturally to a lot of us, that, well, I just want to tell you my point of view,
Hmm.
and I want to talk to you about me and
Hmm.
what I think, and that's a part of conversation as well. But when there's only that without, let me actually try to care about what you think, then
Yes.
it doesn't go anywhere near where
Yes.
it could go.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, because in a simplistic perspective, I'm thinking of times where I might have a behavior that I disagree with that I would love
Hmm.
to see change. And if I go straight to that behavior, I
Hmm.
would miss out on the why behind it.
Right.
And I'm trying to solve a problem that's not there and then
Hmm.
creating a problem that's not there, instead of taking the time to say, hey, what's going on? What's the, trying to understand the motivation behind something so we have this
Right.
common ground and understanding, and then we can move forward together.
Yeah.
And that's redemptive.
Yeah. Being able to seek out the roots of whatever
Mhm.
the thing is,
Yeah.
that's a more comprehensive way to deal with whatever the thing is,
Mhm.
because if the response is, well, I'm going to shut down this behavior, then okay, maybe that works for a time, but then it goes underground and it manifests somewhere else, and
Mhm. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the way God and the way Jesus and the Holy Spirit work with us as individuals is to get down to the deepest animating factors in our hearts and souls. And we'll never be able to do that as good as the Holy Spirit can, right? But it's um
Hmm.
it's that sort of pattern
Hmm.
of,
Hmm.
well, let's deal with this on a deeper level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love to, as I'm hearing you share these thoughts with us, I'm thinking through other relationships that I have that aren't that parent-child relationship, but the value of bringing this perspective to every relationship. Because
Hmm.
when I'm having, when hey, I heard this song, let's have a fun conversation about this song that's not an us versus them. Can you
Hmm.
believe that's the lyric? But instead, it's this appreciation of the good. It's a analysis of the areas where it could be better and could be
Hmm.
different, and then where is the truth in scripture. And
Yeah.
that's a fun conversation to have with a spouse or with a friend. And that's like analysis gone right,
Hmm.
instead of us versus them or this other perspective. It's, hey, let's be curious and
Yeah.
grow and have these growing curious conversations.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you nailed the good bad Bible framework that
Mhm.
we talk
Yeah.
about,
Yeah, you
that's
guys have a good thing going
yeah.
there.
Yeah, right.
Hey, I've seen studies that say that the average American teen uses screens for 8.5 hours a day. What are some
Hmm.
practical things that a mentor can do to disciple the next generation in this context?
Great question. And I think a lot of how this goes depends on what are they doing as individuals during
Mhm.
those 8.5 hours.
Hmm.
Because not all screen time is created equal, you
Yes.
know. Um, Depending on what's happening during that time, discipleship might need to take totally different directions.
Hmm.
And again, you won't know what that is unless you're already in the process of trying to care about what they're caring about and pay attention to what they're paying attention to, right?
Hmm.
Again, to use the example I used earlier, if 4 of those hours are watching videos about how to get rich, then maybe there are conversations about money that become relevant. If four
Hmm.
of those hours are watching makeup tutorials, maybe there are conversations about beauty that become relevant.
Hmm.
Um, so I think discipleship and mentorship in that context has to start with, first of all, is is 8.5 hours true of you? Because
Hmm.
that's an average,
Right.
right? So for some kids, it might be 3 hours. For
Hmm.
others, it might be 15,
Right.
So figuring out where they actually are on that. Um, and then also, I would say if we're concerned about the amount of screen time that's being spent there, we should probably take a look at our own screen time reports,
Oh, yeah.
and
Bring in the disc in, Evan.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of internet connected devices make it very easy to track that.
Yes.
I'm talking to you on a MacBook. I have an iPhone here. They'll tell me,
Yes.
you know.
Every Sunday morning.
Yeah. And I think that if we want to ask someone else, our son or daughter, to reduce the amount of screen time that they're spending, it
Hmm.
buys credibility if we're willing to take similar steps ourselves.
Yes.
Um, and I think that there can be an authenticity to that, like, hey, I really believe that there are a lot of amazing things in life and that screen time is getting in the way of that for our family, or however someone wants to phrase it. And I want us to all take steps to be more present with each other.
Hmm.
And so I'm gonna do this, 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 and this. And I'd love if we could all do that together. Something like that
Yes.
that puts
It's
you in the boat
camaraderie.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's not just because the hypocrisy will just be um loathsome
Yes.
to a a, uh, a teenager. They're like, dude, you're checking your email at dinner all the time.
Hmm.
And it's a big problem if I do it.
Hmm.
So I feel like that's almost in a way taking the plank out of our own eyes
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
before we try to take the speck out over there.
Yes.
Um, and so there's that element for the quantity of screen time element. And then yeah, just okay, are you playing Fortnite or Minecraft for
Hmm.
however long each day? Well, you know, tell me about that. What do you like about it? How does Minecraft work?
Yes.
Can I sit with you and experience this together? I don't know how far that went for you guys,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I feel like
That's how far it kept going. Yeah, it's still going.
yeah.
Yeah.
And did you create an account? Did you join their world and start
I
building
don't
with
have
them?
actually I do have my own account and they like to mock me because I always am trying to find where my feet are. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
hop in it. I'll hop in there with them and
That
watch.
is amazing. Um, and you're entering into their world,
Hmm.
and um, not to do like a gigantic, I don't know if this would be considered a Jesus juke or not, but when Jesus took on human flesh, he entered into our world.
Hmm.
He entered into human society. He
Yes.
participated in the cultural rituals. He went to weddings. He went to the synagogue. He participated in what they had going on there.
Hmm.
And Minecraft might not feel like you're entering into a holy experience or
Hmm.
Fortnite or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think in a way, when we're like, I'm going to enter into your space instead of
Hmm.
demanding that you come into my space,
Hmm.
there's a sort of incarnational element that's present there
Hmm.
that I think really makes a difference.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a beautiful picture. Um, I love that. That's my favorite. One of my favorite, we're nerds, Evan, in our family. So
Yeah,
like we're the board game nerds, we're Tolkien and Lewis nerds.
nice.
And so all that to say there's these precious things that are a family culture that we experience together. And I know that if I make a nerdy Tolkien joke, my family's gonna get it.
Hmm.
And so then what you're talking about is extending that same gift to them and
Hmm.
entering into like just as they've entered into our culture, we're doing that with them, and
Right.
that's sticky. That's where
Yeah.
the relationships happen. I love it. I'm gonna get my Minecraft on this weekend. There's
Yeah, awesome.
yeah.
That's great. But it buys opportunities for conversation.
Yes.
Maybe a good chunk of the time you're talking about how to avoid zombies and creepers or whatever, or
Right.
you're like, what are you building right now? But then you're also creating a space where it's like,
Yeah.
how's school going?
Yes.
Yeah, or is
Hmm.
there anyone you have a crush on, or
Yes.
how's your relationship with God, or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And because you've created that shared context, those kinds of things can happen. Those
Hmm.
kinds of topics can come up,
Yeah.
and they feel there's a level of trust that is added there
Mhm.
because you're going in and you're not like, well, I don't know if you felt like this is stupid, this is a waste of time, or sounds like you probably haven't.
Yeah.
Um, but when we enter into those spaces and don't come in with a bulldozer,
Hmm.
right? It opens up
Yeah.
opportunities for conversation about other things, and it
Yeah.
builds again trust.
Yes. Yeah, that is transformational, Evan. And that's like the biggest thing. So I grew up in a very anti-video game culture
Hmm.
and it was a very strong one. And I didn't realize how much of that I brought forward into
Hmm.
my adulthood and parenting until, my husband, who grew up in a very gamer friendly world, loves
Yeah.
Jesus like crazy, very grounded. We started implementing these things and we had a lot of good conversations about
Mm.
what are your goals? Here's how I feel about this. What does this look like? And
Yeah.
here's what changed it all for me. I remember sitting at our kitchen table on a Saturday, just plinking away on my laptop, and one kid was they're playing StarCraft, which is an old school gamer game.
Mm. Yeah, it
And,
is an old school game. Yeah.
so one kid was, on one computer and one kid was on the other, and my husband was in his office, and they all had their headphones on and they're talking to cousins in another state. And I
Hmm.
overheard the conversations that were happening and the
Mm.
relationship building that was being fostered in a
Mm.
context that wouldn't have happened on a Saturday afternoon
Hmm.
without of it. And I was like, okay, all right, here we go. This isn't my natural habitat, but I'm willing to have this conversation now. And it changed everything. So what
Yeah.
you're talking about is like recognizing where's that growth happening? How can we have those conversations? And if I got to learn the names of, the lore of StarCraft and League of Legends to have a good conversation, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think I don't know exactly how common this is, but I think for a lot of um, teens, they'll log in and they'll play around a Fortnite together or
Hmm.
whatever the game is,
Sure.
and then they'll go back to the sort of lobby or
Hmm.
something where it's about to set you up for another round. But and I apologize to the Fortnite fans if I'm butchering the way that the mechanics of that game are set up. But it's this sort of pre-match room where you can just sit
Hmm.
and talk to each other, and that
Okay.
becomes a place of conversation for a lot of people where,
That makes
yeah, they're
sense.
talking inside of this game,
Yes.
but they're not even playing the game. It's just a
Mhm.
platform for connection. So I don't know. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of layers to it that,
There are. And I
yeah.
can think of how there's so many opportunities as a parent to help a young person learn to navigate that in a healthy way, to
Hmm.
recognize the risks, to recognize the areas for wisdom, and to wisely learn that. Because, I mean, they're going to be playing different games in 20 years.
Yeah.
And so we're preparing them for what does life look like in that context with these healthy habits, with this wisdom, with this fun and camaraderie and
Hmm.
relationship building that can happen.
Totally.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Evan, I love it. Okay, next question. I've had a lot of talks in this conversation series with people who have encouraged us to set down our smartphones, to look someone in the
Hmm.
eye, to lean in, engage. There's a place for that in the room discipleship, and I'm passionate about it. I know you are too.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm wondering, on the other hand, there's this element to discipleship in our day and age. We've kind of covered it, where we can like embrace the reality of the technology that we have.
Hmm.
Do you have thoughts on digital discipleship? I mean, here we are in two different states having this
Hmm.
amazing conversation that wouldn't happen without digital
Right.
technology. What are other ways that we as mentors can leverage technology as a tool and a gift?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question because it can be easy in these conversations to only say, well, the 8.5 hours of screen time is really just kind of a an obstacle to discipleship, right?
Hmm.
But if we believe that God really is everywhere and really can use everything, then we should be able to see that in the digital side of things and in the, of course, offline
Yes.
side of things. Um, and I think this gets back to the idea of leveraging, paying again, leveraging what our our sons, our daughters, our kids in youth group, our whatever,
Hmm.
are paying attention to what they're preoccupied with
Hmm.
and trying to ask, what's appealing to you about this?
Hmm.
I think about when Jesus told parables,
Hmm.
he used what was familiar to his audience to point them to the kingdom of God.
Hmm.
He talked about seeds and harvests and sheep and goats and weddings. These were the fixtures of the people that he was talking to.
Hmm.
This is what life was like for a lot of them,
Yes.
and maybe some people want to say, well, Jesus he's kind of cheating there because as God, he starts out with a lot more knowledge than we do, but I think the example again is of caring enough about what someone is paying attention
Hmm.
to be able to use that
Yes.
in conversation, and I
Hmm.
think we have to be able to do that with what's going on digitally,
Hmm.
because that's such a huge percentage of how so many of us spend our lives, and
Right.
I do think that there are obstacles to being able to do that well.
Hmm.
One of them that comes to mind is just the pace with which things shift and change and develop, even just scrolling through your own social media feed. Like
Hmm.
these apps are designed not to encourage you to really slow down and focus on something for very long, but just to kind of like
Hmm.
keep
Hmm.
going. And there's a sense in which that just kind of becomes this barrage of ideas that we only kind of process and just
Hmm.
keep like flipping through it. And that's a generalization, but I do think that that sort of quantity of content game is a strategy on the part of various social media companies
Hmm.
to just kind of overwhelm our brains with novelty.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so that adds a level of complication to, well, what did that video mean to you? And it's like, oh, the one that I watched for 9 seconds.
Yes.
Um, I don't know. It was
Hmm.
funny, and it's like there's elements of that. So part of the conversation, I feel like, ends up being about the whole experience, not just individual videos that are
Sure.
maybe just kind of stacking on top. It's like, okay, you were just on TikTok for 3 hours.
Hmm.
What was that? What happened during those 3 hours? What was that experience like? There's an organization called the Center for Humane Technology that I really appreciate. They're
Hmm.
made up of people who worked at the big Silicon Valley companies,
Hmm.
Meta, Apple, Google, whatever. And they've all kind of defected and come
Yeah.
to create their own organization that wants to help create technology that's more humane and that actually
Hmm.
promotes human flourishing.
Yes.
So I
Doing.
think that's part of the conversation is what would it take to design technology that actually promoted human flourishing and not just
Mhm.
maximizing engagement?
Yes.
Um, and they have all these ideas like, well, maybe what if after you spend a certain amount of time on an app and then you switch off, there's a little notification that's like, hey, you just spent 3 hours on this app. Was this time well spent? And then you can just say,
Hmm.
yeah, or actually, no, it wasn't.
Yes.
And then just kind of forcing a little bit of um, self-evaluation on that.
Yes.
I think that's super intriguing.
Yes.
I feel like this is a space where people have to get really creative,
Hmm.
um, because it's just become the norm
Hmm.
to like that. I mean, that's why people scroll on social media platforms, not all of the time, but a lot of the time,
Hmm.
is to just have something monotonous so that our brains don't really have to
Hmm.
work, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and recognizing that reality, because and then there's the whole time where I'm watching a TV show and scrolling,
yeah,
and
right,
and so I'm doing it to the nth degree there, and what that looks like.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading an article a couple months ago that was just talking about how for a lot of young people they want to have they want to have social media feeds open while they're watching something so that in between important pieces of dialogue, they can stay connected with their social media feed and they don't want to have to waste time with the pauses in between sentences or something like that.
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah.
let me just maximize
Yes.
the
Yeah.
amount of time. And that I don't say that to like make fun of the rising generation. I think they have inherited a world that is being programmed to manipulate their brains to the nth degree to get
Hmm.
used to
Hmm.
continual stimulation. Empathy is
Hmm.
just, you know, if we feel addicted to our phones, it's not a personal weakness. We're exhibiting a predictable response to a perfectly executed design. That
Hmm.
kind of thing. That's a quote from
Hmm.
Sherry Turkle that I have
Hmm.
committed to memory.
Can you say that again, Evan? Say it one more
Yeah. So it's if we feel addicted to our phones,
time.
it is not a personal weakness. We are exhibiting a predictable response to a perfectly executed design.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's from her book, Reclaiming Conversation, which
Hmm.
is a great book.
That's a good book. Yeah. So what I hear you talking about then is this, if we're talking about digital discipleship and what does
Hmm
it look like to enter that space with a mentor's heart, recognize that you're entering a space that's already designed to disciple users
Mm,
toward engagement and
yes.
use and inundation. And so you're not in like you're entering this field where that's already the premise. And so
Mm,
yeah, be willing to have those big conversations like you're talking about, like what does humane design look like in this context? What
hmm
does healthy engagement look like for this personality at this season of life? Is that a healthy thing? So
Right.
like modeling what that conversation looks like so that as we enter, we're not always getting into that suck of the same thing.
hmm
Hmm.
Yes,
And I say that
yes.
to myself. I mean, that's me. I'm in that constant evaluation of, yeah, how much screen time was that? Ooh, what did I do instead? Ooh, and
Right. And the situation that we're in as modern human beings is that it requires really going out of the way in order to avoid falling into those traps because
yes.
the gravitational pull traps is maybe a too dark and dramatic of a word,
Yeah.
but the gravitational pull is just really strong to just
Hmm.
like binge and consume more and more, and it's like we
Hmm.
have to set up screen time passwords and give someone else the code, and we have to lock stuff down
Yeah.
in a way that is it's an uphill climb,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's self-denial becomes harder
Hmm.
because we're just, I mean,
Yeah.
we're pulled in a very different direction.
It's true. It's true. For me personally, like asking myself, am I creating or am I consuming?
Hmm
Just asking myself that simple question just helps me, is this which one am I doing? Because it's one or the other.
Yeah, right. That's good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've been made in the image of a creator.
Yes.
So I think there's something there that's core to
Hmm.
what does it mean to live fully into our humanity?
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
and I mean, I'm with you 100%.
I love that. I love that. And I love your perspective too, Evan, that all of life is sacred. And
Hmm
that here too is a space where an eternal God is existing. What does it look like
hmm
to join him in that?
Right.
And in what context does it look like to do that?
Right.
Hmm.
Totally.
I love that, Evan. Thank you. Hmm. Okay, so Evan, you guys are really good at creating phenomenal resources, and there's too many. I couldn't pick a favorite. So, so if a listener were to leave this conversation and take just one action step, that one subscribe, that one visit, that one download, what would you recommend as a first step from Axis?
Yeah, so I would say the best first step would be we have a newsletter that we send out every Friday. It's
Hmm.
called The Culture Translator. It's a 5-minute read, breaking down the biggest trends in pop culture and teen culture that week with biblical application and conversation starters. So
Yes.
to sign up for that, I would point people to axis.org. That's axis.org/CT.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And as as someone who has subscribed and read, sometimes you subscribe and just goes in the inbox,
Yeah.
and but the translator gets read every week because it's so valuable to me as a parent, as a communicator,
Mm.
as a mentor, and I highly recommend it. It's worth that one subscribe for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So, a person that's watching or listening this conversation, they've already opted into discipleship. They're living that purposeful, Jesus-focused life. They're already learning and growing as a follower of Jesus. That's one reason they're watching right now. Evan, what encouragement might you have for that person?
Yeah, I think I would love to say to that person, keep going.
Mhm.
And when it comes to passing on the faith to the next generation, you can't give something that you yourself don't have. There's not really a way to authentically, successfully, whatever word you want to use, stand back and facilitate someone else's devotion to God unless
Mhm.
you're kind of going there yourself. It's the whole like come and see
Mhm.
uh, mentality. Like we talked about with the screen time thing, teens care about what's authentic to you. And I think if you can show that your faith means something real to you, it helps it mean something real to them too.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good reminder and perspective. Um, okay, so conversely, there might be someone watching or listening who feels like, man, they really messed this up. They missed the memo. Now their child is engaging with a culture that the parent doesn't understand, that they can't control, that Pandora's box is open. They don't know how to respond. What thoughts might you have for this person?
Yeah. This is tough. Um, I think I would want to say, first of all, it's never too late to show up with kindness and curiosity. Um, you know, Maybe your son or daughter has already absorbed certain ideas or worldview assumptions,
Hmm.
and you can still ask about those and
Hmm.
hold space for them to articulate their thoughts.
Yeah.
That's a posture in conversation that I want to say like 999 times out of 1,000 is going to be well received.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe there's one time where it's like, you're too nice or something. But it's going back to that idea of being heard is so close to being loved that
Hmm.
for the average person they're nearly indistinguishable. There's another line that was something like, home is not the place where you live. Home is wherever you are understood.
Hmm.
I just feel like that is just beautiful, and I think that being willing to offer that kind of understanding
Hmm.
is so key to conversation, and it's something that can still be done even if
Hmm.
maybe stuff has developed and you weren't really aware of it at the time, and now it's grown into something that's
Hmm.
really complicated and hard to deal with. And I think I would just also say one other thing. I don't know I don't know how common this is, but I feel like a lot of the time for older generations, there's just a reluctance to apologize to the younger generation because there doesn't feel like, well, I shouldn't have to apologize. I brought you into this world, it's
Right.
I don't owe you anything.
Yeah.
And there's a sense in which, like, yeah, you brought them into this world, but I think, hey, I I haven't been as present in this area of your life as I would like to have been. And
Hmm.
I want this to be something that we can talk about going
Hmm.
forward. Something like that, I feel like um, there's a humility that can be demonstrated there that I
Mhm.
think will make a real difference
Oh,
in some
it's
cases.
yeah, that humility and openness, that curiosity that you're talking about,
Yeah.
to recognize, hey, right now is a good time to start these
Yeah.
conversations, and like that this moment right now is a great time to kick off those conversations that, will kick off and continue
Right.
and be there. It reminds me, a while back, I was prepping for an interview and I was speaking with a producer. And so I sent him, here are my talking points. Here are my 5 questions that I think that parents can ask their kids to
Hmm.
kick off a conversation. And here's someone in his, 30s off on his career. And he looked at them and he goes, man, I wish my parents would ask me these questions.
Hmm.
And it just was this moment of like this love that I had for him. Here's
Yeah.
this man, he wants his parents to ask him these questions.
Yeah.
And so recognizing, hey, your kids are ready for you to and wanting to enter into a conversation.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And that desire to be heard and understood, it doesn't really go away.
Mm-mm. I still got it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
same here, you know.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Well, Evan, we are grateful to have heard you and are grateful for your time, and we're really looking forward to connecting with you after this. So how do we connect with Axis and with you?
so our website is at axis.org. We are also on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook at Axis Conversations. If someone wants to reach out to me personally for whatever reason, my email is evan@axis.org.
Fantastic. Evan, we're super grateful. I know everyone is going to want to go subscribe to the Culture Translator and get that in their inbox as they continue serving and mentoring the rising generation. You guys are making a difference. Thanks for what you're doing.